So welcome everyone to this next edition of On the Coach House Couch, and I'm really delighted today to introduce a colleague of mine called Ewen MacPherson, who is the People Director from Havas UK, and we've worked together for a number of years on leadership programs and coaching programs. So welcome, and what have your learnings been through lockdown, Ewen?
Well, I think there's a couple of key things that come to mind for me, actually. I think the first one was something I read in the Fortune 500 CEO survey, actually. I think it was the beginning of June when it came out, I think, but we were well into lockdown at that point for a few weeks. And there was a section within the survey where those CEOs were asked what the single most important thing the crisis had taught them. And one of the 4 top responses was the meaning of the word essential.
Okay.
And that really struck me, this sort of reassessment of the word essential. And I think that works in both ways, or at least it has, I think from our perspective within the business. I think we've seen plenty of examples of things that would have been considered essential before the pandemic that probably no longer are.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't, not a Havas example, and I can't remember where I read it, but there was a call center that transitioned from working from home during the lockdown, and the CEO was literally blown away because he'd always, he'd long held an unwavering belief that it couldn't be done, and yet lo and behold, here we are, and it was working perfectly remotely. By default, it gets stripped back to its true definition of something that's absolutely necessary. And within that context, 2 things stood out above all else from a Havas perspective in terms of the truest sense of the word for me. So the first one was our wellbeing program. So for a long time, we've had a really strong wellbeing program in place. And this became more important than ever during lockdown, particularly in the early days when, it was very uncertain and nothing, we were getting conflicting messaging from the press and the government. So, and the other thing was our sense of community. So I think the lockdown, I think lockdown in general and the pandemic in general will shift the focus for leaders and HR particularly from culture and distill it down to community. I think you'll see a shift in the terminology or the framing of that concept. And for me, that's more about like how to keep the spirit of community, the feeling of togetherness, and the interdependency of our people alive in the context of this kind of remote or blended working.
And what kind of things have you done to create that, Ewen?
So at the moment, I mean, we've very much been, I think like most people, sort of soldiering on during the lockdown. In terms of supporting people specifically during it, what was really important to us, or the approach that we took, was about trying to engender trust, really, and we did that through sort of communicating a really clear message from the start. And everything we talked about was all framed around that we appreciated the challenges that were coming everybody's way, and our ask of everyone in that context was just to do their best. We trusted that the work would get done, and then we just repeated that message regularly. And I know it's a bit cliche, but I think a strong foundation of communication was really, really key for us, and we made a conscious effort to double down on that and just make sure we over communicated constantly. So within the context of that wellbeing program, we increased the frequency of our leadership comms. We made our live, what used to be a live monthly sort of town hall meeting, we turned that into a fortnightly video, which we pre-recorded. We said we top and tailed the week with sort of 2 pieces of internal comms to just keep that frequency up and make sure that people felt involved and kept that spirit of connection and community together.
Thank you. That's so helpful, and I think echoes a lot of the other conversations I've been having with leaders over the past few weeks. There's most definitely, I think, an appetite for us to trust in our people, to keep things really simple, but also I think now more than ever that that piece that we talk about on kind of programs is that, you know, really being present and really being authentic. And that to me feels like the most important thing that we can do right now is just work in what we have, work in right now, because as you say, next week the rules will change again, so we can only do with what's going on right now. So I really appreciate the things that you've said, and I look forward to seeing you in person at some point
very soon, I hope.
Thanks so much.
Brilliant. Thanks, Helen.